when I got to the hospital on the first night, she was like, if you had have left that 24 hours later, like it could have been fatal. And I remember thinking, like, I could have died.
Number 15. Rachel Kennedy and Liam McCrohan. Rachel Kennedy and Liam McCrohan are a young British couple who won a gigantic lottery jackpot in 2021. Almost. Every week, Rachel played exactly the same numbers on her Euro Millions lottery tickets. She was so dedicated, she'd set up her online lottery account to automatically buy a ticket with those numbers. Then, one week, Rachel and Liam checked the lottery draw and couldn't believe their eyes. The winning numbers for the 228 million euro jackpot matched Rachel's numbers. They immediately started planning how they were going to spend such a gigantic amount of cash. The young couple realized their lives had changed forever. But when Rachel checked her online ticket, she spotted something weird. It wasn't there. She contacted the National Lottery website to find out what happened and got the worst possible news. There had been an error when the automatic ticket purchase was taking place, and the payment never went through. In other words, she didn't have a ticket. They missed out on that mind-blowing sum of money, and there was absolutely nothing they can do about it. It might be the biggest lottery tragedy of all time, but at least their lives didn't change. The next winner lost more than he won. Number 14. Daniel Carley. Canadian Daniel Carley won the Ontario Lottery at the most perfect moment ever. He was just about to marry the woman of his dreams, who also happened to be pregnant with their first child. He had a pretty perfect life already, but when he won an incredible 5 million Canadian dollars, or about 4.4 million US dollars, he was given the kind of financial stability that most new parents can only dream of. And his life would have been perfect if he'd used his money that way. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Instead, he and his friends gathered at his dad's bar for a celebration party. That would have been just fine, but when the party ended, Daniel didn't want to stop, so he didn't. Over the next 10 years, he partied all his money away. It won't surprise you that his young wife left to look after his child in a more stable environment. His friends didn't want to know this out-of-control version of Daniel, so they disappeared from his life too. It wasn't long before he ran out of money, and when that happened, he turned to drugs again. But this time, he was selling them. He was eventually arrested and sent to prison for his crimes. Daniel chose a path that led him to losing his perfect life. But sometimes, lottery winners do everything right, and their story still ends in tragedy. That's what happened to the next winner on our list. Number 13. Francisco Guerrero. Francisco Guerrero had been a hard worker his whole life. He'd worked as a bricklayer in Spain, slowly earning himself enough money to support his family, and even buying more than one house. That's pretty impressive. After all that hard work, it almost feels like he'd earned his lottery win. He hit a jackpot worth about $8.6 million. But he wasn't the partying type, and he didn't know what to do with all that cash. So he figured the most responsible thing to do was to take it to the bank. That's the advice lottery winners are always given, so it sounds like a pretty good decision. The experts at the bank told him to invest 40% of his winnings and put the rest into a savings account for his children. That sounded like a good idea to him, and he left his money in their hands. He continued going to work and lived his life the way he did before winning the lottery. After all, he was pretty happy that way. But then something went wrong. He suffered a serious injury to his knee that meant he needed expensive surgery. Luckily, he had millions in that savings account thanks to his lottery winnings. He went down to the bank to withdraw some of his cash, but he was shocked to discover the account was totally empty. What he learned next would horrify anyone. The bank had put 40% of his winnings into a terrible investment. They told him there were no risks, but they were totally wrong. Not only had they lost his investment, but they'd got him into serious debt. To pay it off, they used all the cash in the savings account meant for his kids, and they'd even lost all the properties he'd earned through hard work. That's the perfect example of how many things can go wrong when you hit the lottery. It's pretty sad when someone loses everything because of someone else's mistake, but this next winner definitely caused their own downfall. Number 12. Evelyn Basor. You could say Evelyn Basehor was one of the luckiest people who ever lived. That's because she won the lottery not once, but twice. And her 2 wins happened within just 4 months of each other. The first win in 1985 was worth a whopping $3.9 million. And the second, the next year, was another $1.4 million. That's a lot of cash now, but it was worth even more then. She could have done nearly anything with it. So what did she choose to do? Well, she took it to the casino. I guess she figured her luck worked for her in the past, and she'd make even more money. But she was wrong. Her winning streak was over, and the last time anyone heard of her, she was living in a trailer park and working 2 jobs to pay for food. That's a pretty irresponsible way to spend your lottery winnings. But she's not the only winner who blew all her cash. Here's another one. Number 11. Michael Carroll. At the tender age of just 19, British teen Michael Carroll won the lottery. He collected the $14 million with a police ankle bracelet still around his leg. That probably gives you a good idea of what happened next. He spent wildly buying a mansion he didn't like and spending even more on fixing it up. He built a demolition derby racetrack in the back garden where he destroyed luxury cars. He was starting the day with cocaine and vodka for breakfast, and he spent millions on sex parties in the mansion, even though he had a wife and child. Soon, his family and friends had left him because he was behaving so badly. Lucky for him, when he went broke, his wife decided to take pity on him, and she came back. That's a surprisingly happy ending, considering he said he'd be dead by now if he still had the money. But not everyone gets their life back after. Just ask. Number 10. Andrew Jack Whitaker. Andrew Whitaker was living a pretty comfortable life before he won the lottery. He already had $17 million that he'd earned himself. There's no doubt that's impressive. But his fortune skyrocketed when he got lucky and won the lottery too. His win was a gigantic $315 million. You'd think that because he was pretty rich already, he would have known how to keep that money. But fate had other plans. Criminals got the better of him, totally emptying his bank account with several robberies. Within just 4 years, he was totally broke. He'd even lost the millions of dollars he'd had before winning the lottery. He's not the only winner who was taken advantage of. This next winner was also treated pretty badly. Number 9. Callie Rogers. Back in 2003, Callie Rogers was living in foster care and working at a supermarket. Then, she suddenly made headlines when she became the world's youngest ever lottery winner. She was only 16 at the time, but she now had an incredible $2.3 million in the bank. The British teen totally changed her life with that money, but sadly, not in a good way. She started spending it on crazy stuff, with no role models to help her make good decisions. She also developed a drug habit, and her strange lifestyle made her depressed. That led her to spend tons of cash on plastic surgery, hoping to feel a little better about herself. But it didn't help. She said the money made her feel like nobody cared about her because she would buy drinks for people in bars who were only talking to her so they can get a story they could sell to tabloids. She lost every cent she won and now campaigns to try to change the minimum age for lottery players. Luckily, Callie says she's much happier now she doesn't have the money anymore. She's also a proud mom of 3. But what about this next teenage lottery winner? Number 8. Jane Park.
We wouldn't want to be so sure. You need to call Camelot. So I've stuck the ticket like down my top and ran home like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory with this ticket.
Jane Park was earning just $9 an hour at an office job in 2013. It was her birthday, and she decided to treat herself to her first ever lottery ticket. Incredibly, that ticket hit the jackpot. She won the equivalent of $1.3 million thanks to the Euro Millions lottery, and she was only 17 years old. Unfortunately, instead of using it to start her adult life so she could follow her dreams, she just spent it. Her first purchase was a Louis Vuitton handbag, and that was pretty much how she continued. She bought luxury cars, holidays, and even plastic surgery. It didn't take long before her crazy lifestyle stopped being fun. She said she began to feel depressed and very lonely. Luckily, she could move back in with her mom and try to get her life back on track. Her mom had been pretty clever and had made sure she put some of Jane's winnings into a savings account. So Jane still had some of her millions. And like Callie, she also campaigns to get the minimum legal age for playing the lottery changed. She says she was just too young to handle it. Jane and Callie might be right. Maybe teenagers don't have the maturity to manage that much cash. But our next winner proves that adults can be pretty irresponsible too. Number 7. Keith Go. Keith Go was 58 when he won the lottery. He was a happily married baker when he hit the UK National Lottery jackpot. He went home with winnings equal to $12 million. He could have retired with that money, but instead, he decided to spend it. All he wanted to do was drive fast cars, bet tons of cash on horse racing, spend time in his private executive box at Aston Villa Football Club, and drink loads of alcohol. That's when the real problem started. Tragically, his alcohol addiction finally got so bad that his wife was forced to leave him. That wasn't an easy decision. They loved each other, and splitting up really hurt them both. Before Keith won the lottery, they had been looking forward to retiring and living a peaceful life together. Sadly, soon after his wife left, Keith passed away due to a heart attack. Most people are pretty sure he died of a broken heart. Keith isn't the only lottery winner to die as a result of what he chose to do with his money. But this next story is much weirder. Number 6. Justin Ryder. Justin Ryder's lottery win wasn't as big as most people on this list. He only got $600,000. But he wasn't worried. To him, that was just his chance to afford his ultimate dream. Don't even try to guess what it was. It's too crazy. Justin had watched the classic Austin Powers film Goldmember, and it had given him an idea. He wanted a gold member of his own. So he went out and spent his lottery winnings on some gold paint. And when he got home, he happily dipped his nether regions into it. Then he just went on with his life as normal, glad that he achieved his dream. But it wasn't long before he realized something didn't feel right. So he went back to the store and bought another tin of paint. This time, he chose the more expensive option, which was colored with real gold. But weirdly, he chose not to wash off the first coat before redipping. That was his big mistake. The first pot of paint he'd bought was lead-based paint, and the toxic ingredient was slowly absorbing into his bloodstream. Sadly, he was found dead soon after. The cause of death was lead poisoning. He's not the only lottery winner who didn't do enough research before spending his winnings. Here's another one that made a big mistake by not reading the fine print. Number 5. John McGinnis. Back in 1997, John McGinnis was working as a hospital porter when he hit the UK National Lottery jackpot. His winnings were equal to about $16.4 million, which was a ton of cash back in the 90s. He was pretty generous with his winnings, but he also used some to buy luxuries for himself. But he wasn't spending too widely, definitely not enough to go broke. He decided to spend some of his fortune on his biggest passion, football. So he bought a whole team. It cost him $4.9 million. That's a lot of cash, but he still had loads left, except for one mistake. He had no idea that by buying the team, he was accepting personal responsibility for their debts. Within 12 years, the team's debts had eaten through every cent John had won, plus his own personal savings he'd earned before winning the lottery. He tried to follow his passion, but ended up broke instead. There's no shortage of lottery winners like John, who accidentally picked up a really bad deal. Here's another British winner who made a bad British choice. Number 4. John Roberts. John Roberts was so poor before winning the lottery that he was living in government housing in Scotland because he couldn't afford to pay rent. We can only imagine what it must have felt like to suddenly win over $5 million. Unfortunately, he didn't really know what to do with all that cash, so he started buying any luxury item he could dream of. But that wasn't his biggest mistake. One day, 2 of his friends came to him with a business deal. They easily convinced him to invest. John loved the idea of going into business with friends, except they weren't really his friends. Sadly, they'd lied about the investment, and they took off with the last of John's money. Just 3 years after his big win, he was broke and living in a mobile home. It's definitely true, you gotta be careful when choosing your friends. Here's another lottery winner who found that out the hard way. Number 3. Marie Holmes. Marie Holmes was a single mom who was working 3 jobs to put food on the table. Then, in 2015, she got lucky when her North Carolina Powerball ticket won her a whopping $188 million. That was her share of a larger $564 million jackpot that was split between 3 winners. Her problem started straight away when her family accused her of stealing the ticket. They'd said Marie's mom was actually the one who chose the numbers. It turned out they were right. Marie thought it was a quick pick ticket, but her mom had carefully chosen the numbers for her. But luckily for Marie, her mom said she wanted her to have the ticket. After that, Marie's life only got worse. She tried to do something good by giving money to her church, but the priest sued her for not giving them as much as she'd said at the start. Then she started spending way too much cash, and she kept having to bail her heroin trafficker boyfriend out of prison. Brace yourself. The cash she spent on his bail added up to a mind-blowing $21 million. Crazy, right? It didn't work. He still got a prison sentence in the end. You'd think he would at least be grateful, but he later sued her from prison when she sold some of the expensive gifts she bought him. She's basically broke these days. Marie was betrayed by a lot of people. She clearly didn't deserve to be sued for generously giving people money, but this next winner did the opposite and caused her own problems. Number 2. Tanya Lynn Dickerson. This story started in Waffle House. The group of waitresses who worked there had become pretty close over the years, and they decided they would buy some lottery tickets together. The idea was that each one would buy a ticket, and if any of the tickets won, they'd split the winnings between them. It was a nice thought, even if none of them expected to win. But they were wrong. One of the waitresses checked her ticket the next day and realized it was worth $10 million. There was just one problem. Tonda was the holder of the winning ticket, and she decided she didn't want to share. Obviously, the other waitresses were pretty unhappy about that. Not only had they lost out on their money, but they had also been betrayed by someone they thought was their friend. So they got together and sued Tonda. Unfortunately, they lost the case, and Tonda got away with all the cash. By then, the boss from Waffle House had heard what she'd done. He couldn't believe she treated her friends like that and got away with it. So he tried to get some justice for the waitresses. He sued Tonda, saying the waitress had promised to buy him a new truck if they'd won. The case went all the way to Supreme Court, but Tonda eventually won again. She nearly got away with it, but then she slipped up. Tonda decided to protect her money by opening a corporation. That would have been safe, except that she gifted shares of the corporation to her family. That was a big mistake because she didn't realize those shares qualified for gift tax. The IRS came after her when they realized the tax hadn't been paid, and she was forced to hand over $1 million. So none of her friends got the share of the money, but at least she had to pay something. She's not even the only lottery winner who was meant to share the cash but tried to take it all for herself. The last winner on our list got what was coming to her though. Number 1. Denise Rossi. Denise Rossi got super lucky one day when she hit the lottery jackpot. She won $1.3 million. That's pretty amazing news. So you'd think the first thing she would have done is tell her husband. After all, they've been married for 25 years. But she had other plans. She kept her win a secret, and instead of celebrating with her husband, Thomas, she asked for a divorce. She said later she didn't want him to get any of the money. She just wanted it all for herself and was happy to break up their marriage to get her way. But it didn't work. During her divorce proceedings, someone found out what she'd done, and that information really counted against her. According to the law, not disclosing the lottery win counted as fraud. In the end, she was ordered to pay all of her winnings to her now ex-husband. All these winners missed out on changing their lives one way or another, but it doesn't have to be that way. Take a look at our list of the smartest lottery winners in the world to see how to handle your lottery winnings the right way.